Ladies and gentlemen, this is Thrice with Thrice's Download here on a late Thursday night episode. Episode's called Magick with a K, everybody. If you don't even know what Magick with a K means, you're in for a little bit of information here that may change a perspective that you had on the word magic. Because there are two different words, magic with just a C and magic with a K. Most people say that Magick with a K came about after Lester Crowley and his whole bunch of hooligans started developing more newer, modern styles of magic. So that's something interesting to look into. Lester Crowley has been demonized and labeled as this horrific person because of what he has talked about and what he has been claimed to go through as far as sacrificial things, whatever kind of bloodletting, dark magic, all that stuff. You don't really know unless you were there. And I'm not saying we need to give him more credit than he deserves or, discredit him at all. I'm just simply saying that it's always good to take everything with a grain of salt. Don't take it as the whole thing. Just take it as information. It's always good to learn and kind of theorize and have fun with it. So Lester Crowley is a fun person to study if you want to kind of get a weird perspective on magic in general. But Magick with a K has been taken on by a lot of different people because of the fact that, at least from my perspective, and I know I've read from different authors that state that it really helps separate from this simple illusionary sleight of hand aspect that is done for performance and for show. Magick with a K is a aspect of creating with the will. So do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the land, or shall be the whole of the law. There's different ones. There's different ways of that phrase, or there's different variations of that phrase. Sorry, guys, it's late. But it's pretty interesting how in even the different variations, it is the same thing. It's do what thou wilt. So your will, do what you will. Just do no harm to others is a term that's actually used in a lot of earth-based Druidic kind of style, Wicca style. I look at Wicca as a branch off from the Druidic ancient North European aspect of magic practices. And magic, we really just, you gotta look at it, it's like the word God. We all have our own connotations, our own definition of what a certain word means. Magic, especially with the K, when a lot of people who use it, they use it like, I've got this book called Making Magic, and it says what it is afterwards, and it has the four elements and symbol or alchemical symbolism there on the page, like the front cover page. So this person who wrote this book, they're using that word as a description of the practical four elemental magic, where you learn about the four corners, the four elements, and how that pertains to your material reality. Some go deep into the astrological significance and relate the zodiac, everything else. And that's what I'm talking about, is there all these different parts of this culture of magic, and this mysticism really comes from so many different varieties of ancient texts, from Egypt, from the Chaldean aspect in Persian empires, from the Greeks. Well, the Greeks got a lot of stuff from the Middle East, but there's the northern aspect. You got the Vikings and the whole Druidic and Nordic cultures. It's fascinating, folks, when you look at all the different aspects, including even in Asia, and that's where the zodiac comes in, China, and then also in Africa. You have all of the stuff that hoodoo is based off of, and they're still practicing shamans in Africa, as well as South America. If you want to take a good ayahuasca trip or some good peyote trip, and I'm not saying trip as in like trip out, man, and get all crazy. I'm talking about if you want to take a spiritual journey, a trip, go down to South America and go to one of these little, I don't want to call it hospice, but it's like a wellness center, and you go and you do a trip with a shaman and you do it with other people, and you can roam around. There's people to watch you. Come back, don't wander too far. There's big giant cats out there and snakes that will eat you. So, but there's tons of different experiences that are out there when it comes to this concept of magic. in the ancient Egyptian times, they're called Magi. Some even say that they're called Jedi, and that's where the Star Wars aspect comes from. And I mean, I'm very serious. I look at it and I saw it as Jedi, and I've heard it said as Jedi, but some people say it is the Jedi, and it's just you're supposed to pause because it's like a break in the word. But they were basically the warrior priests that protected the land and everything, and also protected the main priesthood. So, really interesting if you look at the history of that and go back to the aspects of Atlantis, when they had all sorts of magical practices, also involving the aspects of electromagnetics of different earth materials such as quartz and gold, copper, all sorts of things. And they're finding all these different structures that are in these pyramid-like structures, and there's a little bit of evidence that a lot of people are starting to bring up, and showing that there's a lot of bit of evidence that some of these things may have been designed to be some sort of, channeling point because of the way the water runs underneath, or the way that it's lined up on these things called the ley lines or the dragon lines. I mean, it's just interesting stuff, folks. I'm not saying that any of this stuff is true. I'm just saying that this is fun information to learn. You can check it out. Google's a fun thing. Wikipedia will give you all, basics of kind of the things that I'm saying right now. And then you can take that stuff and go further and dig deeper. There's tons of people out there who are sharing this information openly on the internet. And there's books out there. I mean, I just told you, Making Magic. That's a book. Talk about elemental magic. There's a book called God and the 72 Names of God. And it has Hebraic names. It's a great meditation book on meditating on little mantras, and then meditating on the name in Hebrew of God for that meaning. Because Hebrew, the language of the Hebrew culture, is all riddled with a magic relation to their God, or God in a sense, because there's really, let's not go there. But it's a fascinating culture when you really study it, and the rabbis are in Hebrew culture, or in Judaic culture nowadays, the rabbis are the ones who study the tradition of what Hebrew culture was all about. But regular Judaic people, like Judeo-Americans, or even Judeo-Christian Americans, study a form of that traditional culture. And it's like a branch off, it's a continuation. And that's something that's phenomenal to me. I mean, if you don't know about that, look into it. It's pretty interesting how, the Jewish people aren't really the Hebrews anymore. The Hebrews were a larger number of people instead of just one tribe, and the Jewish people are only one tribe of Judea. And then you have this whole thing about Cossack Jews. It gets crazy. So it's just like Christianity, how there's all these different versions of Christianity, and it gets a little complicated because it has to do with religion, it has to do with faith, and that's where the aspect of ancestry and where you're from becomes a little askew. And magic is interesting because it is in all these different doctrines and dogmas, and a lot of the times these secular religions or these secular theologies will limit the practice of this magic to only these higher echelon figures, which is kind of interesting to me. And then it's like nowadays you got all this propaganda going against magic, saying it's all Satanism, it's all dark and evil, and it seems like this mixed connotation between a Christian and an atheist approach, because it's really interesting. A lot of people think that a lot of atheists are like into that dark, crazy stuff, but really, a lot of atheists don't believe in that kind of stuff. They believe in science, they believe in material things. So it seems like atheists and Christians, and this is just my opinion, folks, this is my perspective, I just kind of notice when I look around, and the people who post the kind of things that are anti-magic, or say Freemasons are all Satanists, or the Illuminati this, and the one world government conspiracy aspect, there's always conspiracy, there's always crazy shit going on. Pardon my language, but that's the reality. But there's a lot more to the picture when it comes to this mystical side of life, these occult things, these Rosicrucian, Freemason, the different Hermetic orders, and the Golden Dawn aspect. so many different branches in the last couple hundred years of what's happened and how much has changed. And then if you go back thousands of years, there's even more culture and tradition when it comes to the magical practices and the ancient occult of, fraternities and sororities and priesthoods that really create what we know for theology today and doctrine. I mean, all the holidays in our American Christian, or your whatever, Christian Western society, the holidays are all based on pagan holidays from different cultures. And it was all based upon the sun and the moon and rotations and things like that. And it's just like, it really, that's the fun thing about this thing called Magick with a K, is it covers so many different topics. I mean, at least for me, I look at it as really the study of the will and of creation and consciousness. That's my personal definition for it, because that's how I've seen it been used. I mean, when we can give a word a definition, but when we're constantly applying it to multiple things, the word can change, it can evolve, and that's what you have in different aspects of generations. The words are constantly changing, and that is magic in itself. To utilize this thing called language, to allow it to flow out of you in a conscious form where you're constantly creating, but without thinking about it, just allowing it to be, because you are meant to be, because it is meant to be, because everything's happening for a reason. If you're listening to this podcast right now and you've stuck on for this long, there's a reason you're listening, because something inside of you wants to hear this, or you're just being nice to me because you're my friend or my family, and I love you guys. I'm just kidding, but you gotta really just focus on that aspect, that these words are an act of magic. Every time you say something, you're committing to the reality. You're willing your aspect of perspective to be created. You are pushing your will upon the reality. And that's consciousness. That's the observer effect. If you haven't seen What the Bleep Do We Know, I plug them all the time. What the Bleep Do We Know is a phenomenal movie. It will talk about the observer effect and quantum physics and just blow your mind about your cells in your body and emotional signals that are all electricity. And it's just like, boom, your mind blown. And, that doesn't touch on magic, but it all correlates. Like I said, the aspect of magic to me is really the whole process, astrology, astronomy, physics, chemistry, alchemy. And alchemy goes into so many different topics in itself. There's practical magic, ceremonial magic, ritualistic magic, high magic, basic magics, casting spells, all different concepts and words that we can use in order to describe the power of the will. That's how I look at it. It doesn't matter what you call it. It's about willing yourself to be what you want to be or where you want to be. And if you constantly say, oh, I'm never going to get this, or this is always happening, that's always happening, guess what? It's always going to happen. You're never going to get that. This is how your life's going to be. And that's been one of the biggest things, I'll tell you, the biggest things that I've had to learn is we really have this much control. If you look at all these successful people, what do they say? You got to get up, you got to do it. You got to wake up, you got to do it. It's fun because it's like I was laughing. I have these motivational clips on my YouTube channel, and my fiance cannot stand somebody yelling at her like that. And I love it. It's this coach guy, and he goes and gives motivational speeches to all these teams and stuff. And he's just like, you gotta want to win. Or one of the things he was, you gotta want to succeed as much as you want to breathe. And that's a great line, but the way he's saying it is so harsh and so strong, and I love it because I'll play him and I'll go for my jog, or go for a run, depending on how much I need to work that day. But it's all about that aspect of doing it as much as you would want if you were suffocating. I love that line. If you were going to drown, you'd be fighting for air. So why aren't you fighting to be who you are? And that's something I've had to ask myself. I did a podcast about Monday interventions and having that intervention with